All right, 7 o'clock here on your Thursday night. We begin over at the State House where this year's legislative session ended about 2 hours ago. News 19's Julia Kaufman breaks down their business of the day and what's next for the General Assembly.
It was a busy day here at the South Carolina State House. Both the Senate and House worked down to the wire until that 5 p.m. deadline, but not all bills made it in time.
This is one of those things where you're going to have to get an agreement on it, and they just couldn't agree. So there was a lot of work, especially the last few days, to try to come up with something, and it just didn't happen.
Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey is referring to the bill that could have restructured USC's Board of Trustees. It would have fired the current members if passed, but died at the last minute in the Senate. And in the House, there was a last-second effort to revive the hate crime bill, but that didn't make it either.
It certainly would have been a better session had we been able to address the hate crimes bill.
Bills that did pass on the last day of session include access to birth control without a doctor's prescription and a measure to change South Carolina's lifelong sex offender registry, removing offenders after 15 years if they meet certain criteria. Plus, Massey says he's proud of their work on education.
Education scholarship accounts, which I think is going to help a lot of poor children have access to better educational opportunities, but we also help teachers with some unencumbered time, giving them a break during the school day.
That education savings account bill will need to be sorted out in conference committee, as will the state's spending plan, which Senate Minority Leader Brad Hutto is hopeful for.
We've got some particular needs in South Carolina as it relates to infrastructure, broadband expansion, roads in the bill. We'll have to see what comes out of conference, but I think there's high hopes.
Lawmakers will return to the State House in June, where they'll finish their work on the state budget and enter those conference committees. They'll also be able to take up any bills that the governor decides to veto. At the State House, Julia Kaufman, News 19, WLTX.
All right, Julia, thank you. Now, before lawmakers ended the session, the House and Senate did sign off on 2 weeks of no excuse in-person early voting. Now, that measure is going to be taking place immediately if the governor signs it into law. The bill would also make voter fraud a felony. This would include an increase in fines and jail time for people who vote under a fake name, vote more than once, or for poll workers who intentionally break the law. The bill also requires audits of at least 5% of all votes in a county after an election. Right now, it is unclear if the governor will sign the bill, but lawmakers telling us tonight they have the votes to override a possible veto. As a reminder, the deadline to register for in-person voting for the upcoming primary is Friday. You can sign up online through Sunday. To find out more information, simply look for the story on our website, WLTX.com. And lawmakers also passing a bill now that bans the use of debt collection agencies to get debts on school lunches or breakfast accounts. The bill also bans the collection of interest, fees, or penalties for outstanding student debts on their accounts. Advocates for the bill say debt collection affects parents' credit as well as their students' ability to get meals at school. Local leaders and family members of rape victims gathered at the State House for a rally today. Organizers wanted to focus attention and motivate action in regards to how sexual assault and violent crimes are handled by the criminal justice system.
South Carolina should be concerned for their safety. Profit, power, positional appointments seem to take front seat over the rights of victims and their families, and the citizenry is just left a thumb for a ride. The South Carolina legislature needs to make changes so that there is accountability and protection for victims.
Well, today's event was hosted by the South Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. Well, there's been a rain over parts of our coverage area. Let's get the very latest from our chief meteorologist, Stefano Fonte.
Well, JR, for this afternoon, we started to see the showers in the eastern half of the Midlands. Now it's on the western half, so areas like western Orangeburg, Lexington, North Aiken, Saluda, Newberry counties are now finally getting their rain. Over downtown Columbia, it's still raining, 66 degrees, winds are out of the northeast at 8 miles an hour. Now the rain will start tapering off, and then for some of us in the morning, we could see some light showers. A low is 62 degrees, but as we get to midday, the showers start picking up a little bit more. Temperature will get to 72, but by the afternoon, showers and possibly some scattered storms with a high of 75 degrees. But JR, this is only round one of a few rounds of showers that we're going to be expecting. We'll take a look at that forecast in just a few minutes.
All right, Chief, thank you so much. Lexington deputies have arrested a man who they say shot into a car where a woman and 2 children were inside. This happening last night in the 1700 block of Pine Street in Pelion. 2 victims were found with gunshot wounds inside the vehicle. At the home, a third person in the vehicle, or I should say a third person in the vehicle, was not hurt. 32-year-old Kwame Knight has been charged with 3 counts of attempted murder, kidnapping, and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. He's being held tonight at the Lexington County Jail. Here in Columbia, 1 person was wounded today in an apartment shooting. Few details have been released, but we do know that officers were called to the Spring Lake Apartments. That's just off of Garner's Ferry Road. Once there, they found a young man shot outside of the apartments. He was taken to the hospital. At last check, he was in critical condition. If you have any information that can lead to the shooter, call Crime Stoppers at 1-888-CRIME-SC. Fertilizer, that's what we're being told now is what caused several graves to become discolored at the Lincoln Cemetery in Columbia today. Levy Funeral Home in Columbia telling us after an investigation, the blue substance was not spray paint. It was not vandalism as first suspected. The private cemetery says it was a landscaping chemical that was sprayed over the front part of the property. A cleaning crew was sent out today to remove the substance from the graves. Another DMV office closed due to staffing shortages, this time in Orangeburg. Last week we told you about the office in Irmo Ballantyne. They have since reopened. The DMV, though, in Orangeburg is the only location in the county. It's closed until further notice. You're encouraged, if you live in Orangeburg, to go to Bamberg, St. Matthews, or St. George locations while that Orangeburg DMV office is closed due to staffing issues. The State Education Department says more than $15 million in federal funding is now headed to 19 non-public state schools. The funds are part of an allocation to states under the National Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools program, which helps kids in private and church schools affected by the pandemic. One of these schools is a Catholic school here in Columbia, which received over $350,000. Back to the State House now, and before lawmakers ended their work in Columbia today, they took time to recognize the Mid-Carolina Youth Shotgun Team for winning the 2022 State South Carolina DNR Governor's Cup Youth Shotgun Championship. The award is a culmination of 3 different events throughout the season.
I think it's really great, it helps promote, safety with firearms and, leadership and integrity and, working with teammates. So it's a really great thing, and it's cool that we get to be, commemorated in this way. I've really learned, teamwork. Teamwork is a really big, part of it. You can't win without a team, in my opinion.
Well, South Carolina has more than 1,000 competitive youth registered shooters. The shooters compete for prize money and college scholarships.
Mom, advocate, beautician, accomplished law enforcement officer. Estelle Young has worn many hats in her lifetime, and her servant leadership started before the badge. She marched in downtown Columbia to integrate businesses, and with Dr. King in an effort to secure voting rights in Selma, Alabama on Bloody Sunday. Young worked with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and taught people how to read and write so they could pass literacy tests to vote. That same commitment to creating a safe, equitable community for all people led her to be a highly decorated captain for Columbia's police department, where she broke racial and gender barriers in law enforcement. This is a seat at the table. When you look back on your legacy, what are you the most proud of?
Making sure that other people would want to emulate what I've done with our Explorer program that we had with the police department. Now one of the young men who was one of my Explorers is now deputy chief, and I had about 15 other kids that was in the Explorer program who are now police officers. and they've made rank. So I'm just proud of the fact that they saw enough in me to want to emulate what I did.
You can see that full story again coming up tonight at 11. When we come back, the latest on what's happening with the war in Ukraine as Finland looks to join NATO. We'll get reaction from Charles Bierbauer. Plus, our chief meteorologist, Efren Afonte, he is coming back with a complete check on the rainy forecast. Rain for parts of tonight and into tomorrow, but how's the weekend shaping up? We'll find out in a moment.